17 days into the search for missing Nancy Guthrie, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos sat down for an exclusive interview with Fox News that revealed troubling setbacks in what investigators now characterize as a targeted kidnapping. The conversation, conducted by Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt, unveiled disappointing DNA test results that have left investigators without clear suspects and a grieving family without answers. The case, which began when Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her Tucson area home, has captivated public attention and mobilized extensive law enforcement resources. However, despite the deployment of FBI agents, local sheriff's deputies, and sophisticated forensic analysis, the investigation appears to have stalled at a critical juncture. Among the most significant pieces of physical evidence recovered in the investigation was a glove found approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's property. This discovery initially generated considerable optimism among investigators and the public alike. The glove contained DNA, which was promptly submitted to the FBI's CODIS database, the combined DNA index system that serves as the nation's repository for DNA profiles from convicted offenders and crime scenes. Sheriff Nanos delivered the disappointing news that CODIS returned no hits on the glove's DNA. This means the genetic material found on the glove does not match any profile currently in the National Criminal Database. The implication is significant. Whoever wore that glove has never been convicted of a crime serious enough to warrant DNA collection, or they have somehow evaded the criminal justice system entirely. Perhaps even more critical to the investigation was the discovery of foreign DNA inside Nancy Guthrie's home, genetic material that didn't belong to Nancy or any of her known visitors. This DNA represented what many investigators considered their most promising lead. After all, unknown DNA found at a crime scene often points directly to the perpetrator. However, Sheriff Nanos confirmed that this DNA also produced no CODIS match. Furthermore, when investigators compared the DNA from the glove to the DNA found inside the house, they discovered these were 2 entirely separate genetic profiles. This revelation complicated the investigation significantly, raising questions about whether the glove is even connected to Nancy's disappearance or whether it represents a false lead that has consumed valuable investigative resources. Throughout the interview, Sheriff Nanos was emphatic in rejecting the theory that Nancy Guthrie's disappearance resulted from a burglary gone wrong. This theory had circulated in some media outlets, suggesting that perhaps an intruder entered the home looking for valuables, encountered Nancy unexpectedly, and the situation escalated tragically. The sheriff's conviction stems from both the physical evidence at the scene and his decades of law enforcement experience. "I believe it was a kidnapping, targeted kidnapping," Nanos stated clearly. "I believe whoever did that knew what they were up to." This assessment fundamentally changes the nature of the investigation. A random burglary suggests an opportunistic crime. A targeted kidnapping implies premeditation, planning, and a specific motive involving Nancy Guthrie herself. Criminal defense attorney Josh Ritter, analyzing the case for Fox News, noted that the evidence supports the kidnapping theory. The suspect, captured on surveillance video, arrived equipped with a mask to conceal identity, gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, a gun, suggesting preparedness for confrontation, and a backpack, presumably to carry items or restrain a victim. This level of preparation indicates deliberate criminal intent rather than spontaneous burglary. One of the most puzzling aspects of this case involves ransom notes that have been mentioned but never fully disclosed to the public. If this is indeed a kidnapping, as Sheriff Nanos believes, the typical motive involves financial gain or some form of exchange. Yet there appear to be no ongoing ransom negotiations or communications from the kidnappers. Sheriff Nanos indicated that the ransom note aspect of the investigation falls primarily under FBI jurisdiction and declined to characterize these notes as definitively authentic or inauthentic. This ambiguity adds another layer of mystery to an already complex case. Perhaps the most disheartening revelation from the interview was Sheriff Nanos' admission that investigators have not narrowed down their suspect pool meaningfully. When asked directly whether the investigation had focused on a few dozen potential suspects, Reports had suggested FBI agents were showing photos of approximately 40 individuals at gun stores. The sheriff refuted this claim. "We haven't narrowed it down to anything other than we have certain pieces of evidence that we're looking at to try to find this individual," Nanos explained. This statement, made 16 days into an intensive investigation, suggests that despite extensive resources and effort, investigators lack clear direction toward identifying a suspect. Sheriff Nanos was careful throughout the interview to protect certain details of the investigation. When asked whether anything was taken from Nancy's home besides Nancy herself, he declined to answer. When questioned about signs of forced entry or struggle inside the home, he again refused to comment. His rationale is sound from an investigative standpoint. Certain details known only to the perpetrator can be crucial for validating confessions and prosecuting cases. However, this necessary secrecy also fuels public frustration and concern about the investigation's progress. Given Tucson's proximity to the Mexican border, approximately 65 miles south, investigators naturally considered whether Nancy might have been taken across international lines. Such a scenario would dramatically complicate rescue efforts and jurisdictional issues. Sheriff Nanos indicated that while the FBI has investigated this possibility, there are currently no indications that Nancy was taken to Mexico. This could be encouraging news, suggesting she may still be within a more limited geographic area, though it also means searchers have found no trace of her despite concentrated local efforts. In missing person cases, investigators typically examine those closest to the victim first, as statistics show most violent crimes are perpetrated by someone the victim knows. Sheriff Nanos made a point of emphatically clearing Nancy's entire family, her siblings and their spouses, stating they are 100% victims, not connected to her disappearance. This clearance allows investigators to focus resources outward, searching for external suspects rather than examining family dynamics and relationships. With traditional DNA databases yielding no results, experts suggest the investigation will likely turn to investigative genetic genealogy, IgG. This technique, which gained prominence in cases like the identification of the Golden State Killer and more recently in the Bryan Kohberger case, uses public genealogy databases like Ancestry and 23andMe to identify potential relatives of unknown DNA samples. As Josh Ritter noted, in the Kohberger case, investigators had identified him as a suspect through IgG genealogy 11 days before that information became public with his arrest. This precedent offers hope that similar work may be underway in the Guthrie investigation, even if not publicly disclosed. Former FBI Special Agent Stuart Kaplan suggested that the FBI's relative silence might actually indicate progress. "When I see my agency go dark or go silent, I do believe that they have a person or persons of interest," Kaplan explained. He suggested investigators may be conducting sensitive forensic analysis using techniques they don't want to reveal publicly, concerned about compromising future prosecutions. Investigators have been working directly with Walmart to trace items the suspect was wearing on surveillance footage. This painstaking work involves reviewing purchase records and surveillance footage from multiple store locations, attempting to track down anyone who purchased similar items in the time frame leading to Nancy's disappearance. Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, president and founder of Identifiers International Forensic Genealogy, offered intriguing observations about the suspect's behavior based on the surveillance footage. She noted that the suspect appeared to be wearing 2 pairs of gloves based on the thickness visible in the images. She questioned how someone could effectively operate a firearm with such thick gloves, suggesting the gun may have been primarily for intimidation rather than actual use. Dr. Fitzpatrick also noted the suspect's apparent lack of sophistication. He failed to disable or block the doorbell camera, something that could have been accomplished with simple tape, and instead improvised by pulling flowers from the garden to obstruct the lens. This amateurish approach raises questions about whether this was truly a carefully planned, targeted kidnapping or something else entirely. Dr. Fitzpatrick raised a thought-provoking alternative theory. Could this have been a case of mistaken identity? She referenced the 1993 murder of James Jordan, Michael Jordan's father, whose killers didn't realize who he was until hearing news reports after the crime. Could the suspect have targeted the wrong house, realized his mistake upon encountering Nancy, and then felt compelled to take her to prevent identification? For Nancy Guthrie's family, the lack of progress must be excruciating. 17 days without answers, without knowing whether their loved one is alive, without understanding why this happened. The emotional toll is unimaginable. Each disappointing update, each failed lead, extends their agony. Sheriff Nanos has faced criticism for aspects of the investigation's handling, including what some perceive as contradictory statements about whether the crime was targeted or random. Initially, he suggested investigators were exploring both possibilities. Now he states firmly it was a targeted kidnapping. While such evolution in understanding is natural as evidence accumulates, it can erode public confidence when not clearly explained. Former FBI agent Stuart Kaplan noted that while he understands the reasons for withholding certain information, the lack of transparency can undermine public trust in law enforcement's ability to solve the case. As this investigation enters its third week, several parallel efforts likely continue. IgG analysis. Forensic genealogists are probably working to build family trees from the DNA evidence, searching for potential matches in public databases. Surveillance review. Investigators continue examining footage from Ring cameras, businesses, and traffic cameras, hoping to track the suspect's movements before and after the crime. Retail tracking. The Walmart investigation and similar retail inquiries may eventually identify where the suspect purchased clothing and equipment. Tip investigation. The public has surely provided numerous tips, each requiring follow-up and verification. Physical evidence analysis. Beyond DNA, other forensic evidence from the scene continues to be analyzed. The disappointing DNA results represent significant setbacks, but they don't mark the end of the investigation. Modern forensic techniques, particularly IgG, have solved cases that would have remained cold decades ago. The FBI's expertise and resources, combined with local law enforcement's determination, still offer hope for resolution. Sheriff Nanos, despite the frustration evident in his interview, remains committed to finding Nancy Guthrie and bringing whoever took her to justice. As he noted, there are details of this investigation that cannot yet be shared, details that may ultimately prove crucial to solving this case. For now, Nancy Guthrie's family waits, a community mourns, and investigators continue their painstaking work, hoping that the next lead, the next piece of evidence, or the next breakthrough will finally provide the answers everyone desperately seeks.